Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On this earth, night follows day, and day follows night. And it's an ongoing cycle. And we live with this ongoing cycle. But there's more significance to the words night and day. Night is a time of darkness, and it's also considered the time of darkness for man, when man is in a state of ignorance. It's said when man is ignorant, he is in the night. When man is in torpor, he is in the night. When man is arrogant, he is in the night of his life. And to come into the day of your life is to come into the place of the freedom of the soul, to come into the place where you recognize truth and you recognize the despicable nature of the qualities of the evening, the qualities of the night. There's a certain taste that arrogance and karma and maya and lust and intoxication give to people, a certain level of enjoyment that they get in this world from those things. But that enjoyment is a deceit. You think that you are somehow getting something positive, but in truth, it's a negative enjoyment. It's an enjoyment that brings you away from reality, that brings you away from truth, that brings you away from God. It separates you from God. So in order for true joy to occur, in order for true peace to happen, one has to become closer to God. Man was created, and God asked man what he wanted to be. And he said, well, I want to be peaceful. And God said, and what do you need to be peaceful? He said, well, right now I'm not. So how about you make me a king? If I can be a king, then I can be peaceful. So God said, you can be a king. And he made him a king. And a little while later, God came back to him and said, well, are you peaceful now? And man said, no. He said, well, what do you need? He said, make me rich. So God gave him untold riches in the world. And a while later, he came back and asked man, now that you're rich, are you peaceful? Man said, no. He said, well, then what do you need? He said, give me a woman, a beautiful woman, and then I'll be peaceful. So God gave him a woman. And he came back a little later and he said, are you peaceful? And man said, no. And God said, well, what do you want? He said, give me a palace like unto the heavens. So God gave him a palace. And he asked him a few days later or a while later, are you peaceful? And man said, no, I'm not peaceful. He said, well, what do you want? He said, give me a garden. So God gave him a celestial garden on earth, and came back a little while later and said, well, are you peaceful? He said, no, there are bugs and there are bees and there's smell of manure and it gives me a headache and I have allergies. Somehow I can't be peaceful in this garden. I need cool breezes. So God gave him cool breezes. And he came back later and he said, well, are you peaceful? And he said, no, I'm not peaceful. Something's missing. I said, well, what do you want? He said, give me children. So God gave him children and came back a little later and said, are you peaceful? And man said, no, I need something else. He said, well, what do you need? He said, make me a world leader. And God made him a world leader and came back a little later and he said, are you peaceful? And he said, no. He said, well, then what do you need? He said, allow me to perform miracles. And God gave him the ability to perform miracles. And then he came back later and he said, well, are you peaceful now? And he said, no, I'm still not peaceful. He said, what do you need? He said, make me into a wise man, and then I can give peace to everyone. And he came back a little later and he said, well, now are you peaceful? And he said, no. He said, well, what do you need? He said, let me travel around the world and see all the countries in the world, and then I'll find out what peace is about. So he gave him the ability to travel around the world. And he came back later and he said, well, are you peaceful now? He said, no, I still haven't found peace. What do you need? God said. He said, let me be able to pray. So he sat and tried to pray, but he couldn't concentrate. And so he couldn't find peace in prayer either. So God came to him and said, well, then what do you want? He said, give me women to serve me and to take care of me and to respect me. So God gave him 12 women to serve him and respect him and take care of his needs. But still, he wasn't peaceful. He said, well, then what is it that you need? He said, give me a suit made out of gems so that I can be amidst the glory of the light of their sparkle all the time. And God gave that to him. And he wasn't peaceful. He said, the light from the gems hurt my eyes. There was too much light. He said, well, then what do you want? He said, take away my hunger. So God took away his hunger, and he came back and he said, are you peaceful now? He said, no, I've become skinny and frail from not eating. I'm not peaceful. And then he said, well, what do you want? And finally he broke down, man did, and said, I don't know what I want, God. You have to help me. I don't know how to find peace. The things that I'm asking for aren't bringing me peace. You have to tell me what will bring me peace. And God said to him, the only thing that will bring you peace is for you to understand my qualities. And if you can understand my qualities and integrate those qualities into you, then you can finally find peace. There's no other way to approach peace. Everything is that one. Everything comes from that one. Everything is involved in that one. And it is the mystery of that one that we need to become involved with. And the only way to solve that mystery is to give up who we are and replace that with God's qualities, to become understanding of the unity within existence, and to give up the egocentric self, to give up the mind, and to give up desire. There is an entirely different way of being that exists between man and true man. And true man is very, very rare in this world. True man has transcended the needs that exist for all of us within this creation. Halaj was a great saint in about the 12th century or so. And he heard somebody shouting his name, Halaj, Halaj. And he turned and he saw a little boy. He said, what do you want? He said, I have a question. And Halaj said, well, ask your question. And the little boy said, what do you do when you have food, What do you do when you don't have food? What do you do when you have wealth? And what do you do when you don't have wealth? And Halaj answered, when I have food, I enjoy it. And when I don't have food, I'm patient. And when I have wealth, I thank God for what he has given me and I enjoy it. And when I don't have wealth, I'm patient and look for contentment. And the little boy laughed and said, you call yourself a saint? And then Halaj said to him, well, what do you do when you have wealth and don't have wealth, and when you have food and you don't have food? And the boy said, well, first, let me tell you about my dog. When I give him food, he enjoys it. And when I don't give him food, he's content and goes to sleep and waits. Not a lot different from you. Are you telling me that you're similar to my dog? And Halaj said, well, what do you do? He said, well, when I have food, I distribute it to those who are hungry. And if there's any left, I eat. And when I don't have food, I'm patient. And if I have wealth, I distribute it to the orphans, to the unmarried girls, and to the ones who are poor. And when I don't have wealth, I am patient and I luxuriate in God's wealth. And Halaj turned to the boy and he said, they call me a saint, but truly I am arrogant. And at that moment, his arrogance left him and his heart opened. Now, I'm not saying that each of us can get to that level of saintliness, to that level of being a ketub, to that level of not being in any need. But what we can do is turn our heads from looking for satisfaction in the world and look for satisfaction in truth. We have to begin to study what it is that truly gives us inner satisfaction, inner peace, inner contentment. And the reality of that is that we can spend a lifetime looking for different ways to satisfy ourselves, like in that previous story where we went through about 15 different things that man wanted. The point of that story is that all of us are shaped in a different way. All of us want different things. None of us want all of those things, but the point is, whatever those things are, they are not going to bring us to a state of peace. The world is not going to bring us to a state of peace. So what we individually have to do is learn what it is, in fact, that will bring us peace. How can we find peace? What is it that we have to look for in order to find peace? If you plant a tree, or you plant flowers, or you plant vegetables, you have to give them water and you have to give them fertilizer. Now, what happens to the water and to the fertilizer? It's absorbed by the earth, and then through the earth, it's absorbed into whatever plants that you're planting. But if you ask the earth back for the water, you're not going to get it back. If you ask the earth back for the fertilizer, you're not going to get it back. The payoff is in the taste of the fruit. The payoff is in the taste of the vegetables. By giving water and giving fertilizer, you get something else back. You may not see it right away, but you get something else back. Over time, the tree will grow. Over time, the vegetables will grow. The flowers will grow. All of the things that you've planted and put water and fertilizer on will grow, and you will get the benefit of that. In the same way, as we give towards others, we won't see that benefit immediately, but there is a benefit, and that benefit will come to us. There is a gift for us in the giving, and we need to understand the nature of that gift that is given to us in the giving. Once we begin to understand that mode of existence, then we have changed the course of our life. There's a saying that money can't buy happiness, but there was a rich man who once understood the nature of his wealth, and he said, my money can buy me happiness, but it only buys me happiness when I give it away. And that's when he transcended his wealth. And we have to transcend our wealth. We have to transcend our needs. We have to transcend our connection to the world. The world cannot bring you inner peace. The world cannot bring you inner contentment. We have to somehow begin to understand the nature of that which is formless and the nature of those qualities which belong to that formless power that is one, and that is the creator of all things. We need to attune ourselves to those qualities. So there is a book, and it's called the Asmaul Husna. And this book has the 99 names of God in it, and a description of what those names represent, what they mean, what they are. Those names are entities. Those names are verbs, they're an action, and they're nouns because they describe an entity. God is an entity. God is also this incredible doer of things. And each one of these names is part of him. And so they are distinct, but yet they're part of a unity that is Allah. So we need to begin to understand that even though compassion and justice and mercy and love and kindness are different names, different nouns, different verbs, they all congeal into one. And that one is the creator, the sustainer, the nourisher. That one is at the center of all things. That one is at the center of all existence. And that one is at the center of all peace, at the center of all contentment, at the center of all patience. And for us to experience patience and peace, we have to learn about that one, because peace is only available through that one. And if we look for it in any other place, we're not going to find it. We think we're going to find it, but we're not going to find it because it isn't there to be found. This is something that we have to grasp in our lives. This is something that we have to begin to believe in. And this is what faith is. Faith is taking the words of the prophets and applying them to our life as if they were commands for us, as if they were directions to us. Sitting with a ketub and listening to a ketub is the same as sitting with the commands of prophets. Now the commands are coming from ketubs. But here's the point. Do we look at these things as suggestions, or do we look at these things as commands? It's like in Turkey, we just had someone from Turkey here, and they were driving the car and they kept going through stop signs. And I kept trying to explain to them, you're supposed to stop at stop signs. And they said, well, in Turkey, we don't stop at stop signs. We just look and keep going. And here we call that stoptional. It's not stoptional, it's stop. A command means it's something we're supposed to do. It's not given to us as to, well, decide whether you want to do it or you don't want to do it. So when the Ketub says to us, learn to be free of attachment to this world in order to transcend this world and in order to find your place in the light, as opposed to repeating this life over and over and over through rebirth, he's not saying that it's a choice. He's saying the choice is either rebirths or light. And to pick light, you have to follow the instructions that he gave us. And the instructions that he gave us were evident in his life. They were evident in the way he acted. So we had the supreme example of a fully opened heart in front of us, who showed us what it was like to be without needs, what it was like to be without attachments, what it was like to be totally free, free of blame, free of praise, free of need, free of food, free of titles, free of kingships, free of leaderships, free of everything, totally free. A soul that is so free that its connection to the earth and to this world almost doesn't exist. Its connection is with the Creator and with the transcendent qualities of the Creator and with the gracious qualities of the Creator. We need to begin to fathom that qualities are more important than material wealth. We need to begin to fathom the nature of qualities, the nature of who we truly are. We were created, and the scripture tells us this, in God's image, yet God is without form. So if he's without form, how are we created in his image? Well, we have the ability to take on his qualities, to know his qualities, and to become those qualities. And in the state of being those qualities, an enormous change happens within us. When we function from compassion as opposed to need, when we function from mercy as opposed to arrogance, when we function from love as opposed to desire, there is a huge difference in who we are. And we need to be cognizant of how we function. We need to be cognizant of what we function from, of what our intention is, and what it is that we're looking to accomplish. Are we looking to conquer the world? And right now, we have some examples of people who think they need to conquer the world. Out of nowhere, all of a sudden, they decided they need to become aggressive and conquer the world. Who creates this kind of insanity? How does it happen? Well, it happens internally because man is dissatisfied. And when man is dissatisfied, he looks for answers to his dissatisfaction. Unfortunately, without real guidance, man is incapable of understanding what is going to bring him satisfaction. So he begins to flail at the world. Will killing hundreds of thousands of people bring one satisfaction? Will conquering other countries bring one satisfaction? At the end of the day, you're still who you are. At the end of the day, possessions don't change you internally. At the end of the day, what has to happen is we have to begin to change internally. We must be able to reach a certain kind of maturity in this world. If we don't reach maturity, we will continue to act like a spoiled child who wants what he sees, can't get it, and goes into a tantrum. Now, depending on the amount of someone's power, the effect of that tantrum changes. The effect of that tantrum could be that they destroy some furniture in a house or break a vase or destroy another country. That's the effect of that tantrum from not getting what you want and not being able to find satisfaction internally. In truth, the only way to find satisfaction internally is to begin to understand the qualities of our Creator, to take on those qualities, to surrender to those qualities, and to say to God, I don't know what to do. Help me. We need to form a dialogue with our Creator. We need to form a dialogue about the qualities. We need to form a dialogue about intention. And we need to ask for help so that our intention is appropriate. We need to ask for help so our dialogue is appropriate. We need to ask for help so that our actions in this world are appropriate. There is but one, and it is only through that one that we can find our own reality. It is only through that one that we can find our own peace. It is only through that one that we can find our own contentment. So wherever we look in this world, whether we travel locally or internationally, we're not going to find it in locations. We're not going to find it by going to different places. Everything is available to you while you sit right where you are now sitting. It is all inside of ourselves. Allah placed within us a ray of light from himself, and that exists within us. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It's to be found within us. And when we find it within us, we can begin to save ourselves. And if we can save ourselves, then humanity can be saved. But first, we have to save ourselves. We have to find ourselves. We have to know the truth about ourselves. And that's why it is said, if you know yourself, you will know your Lord, because you are, each of us is part of our Lord. So when we begin to truly understand that, when we fully can grasp that fact, we fully grasp that transcendence, that's when truth enters us. But it can only be with us, and it can only be understood when we understand the qualities, when we become the qualities, when we act out those qualities, when those qualities become who we are. When someone asks about you, do they say, well, he's a kind, compassionate, loving person? Or do they say, he's a lawyer, he's a doctor, he's an Indian chief? What are we truly? Do we take on the titles of the world, or do we take on the titles of God? One of the things that they do in the Islamic world is they give people names of the qualities, like Abdul Rahman, which means the slave of Rahman, Abdul Rahim, the slave of Rahim, the merciful, the compassionate, the slave of compassion, the slave of mercy, the slave of justice, the slave of truth, the slave of love. These names are given so that people will personify the names that they're given. So people can take on those names as if that name were their reality. And this takes a new way of thinking. Can we begin to understand that what is real is not what we see on the outside of us, but what exists on the inside of us? Can we understand that what is real is not the elemental forms that we are constantly in contact with, but the formless qualities that created existence? This existence was created out of love. Yet we who are created out of love act with selfishness and greed and arrogance and look to consume the world. The world was given to us for free. There were no strings attached to it. It was given to everybody. There's a free flow of everything in this existence for each of us. So are we trying to pick up the trinkets of creation, or are we trying to find the reality of the Creator? Understand the difference. We have to understand the difference. We have to know what it is that we truly need. And what we truly need is a connection to our Creator, a connection to our Lord, a connection to the love and truth that comes from Him. Anything else is going to lead us to a dead end. It's going to lead us to a circular repetition of doing the same thing over and over and over. And the existentialists, when they talk about no exit, are talking about a godless existence, because they haven't brought themselves to the point where they can bring God into their existence. And because they can't bring God into their existence, there is no exit. There's a constant being caught within the cycle of return and reincarnation over and over and over. There's nowhere to go. There's no escape from this world other than through God. So God has to become at the forefront of our consciousness. God has to become at the forefront of our intention. God has to become the most real thing that we believe in. And as that happens, we will become closer and closer to Him, closer and closer to the truth, and we will escape from the difficulties of this world into the peace that belongs to Him alone. Because as we come to know Him, we will become to be unto Him. And may that be the path for each and every one of us. May that be the existence for each and every one of us, that the truth of who we are will become known to us, and we will become that truth. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.